Hello and welcome back to the Raisina Fireside Conversations. I'm Ashok, Malik, and my guest is NickClegg, former Deputy Prime Minister of the UK, President Global Affairs of Meta. And if you look at Meta in another form, really, as an independent country with 3.5 million people living in it or using it, he would be Foreign Minister of the world's largest country. Welcome to Raisina, Nick. And let me begin straight away with my first question. Your company and its dazzlingly successful products are chased by a number of consumers and users, but also find themselves in several regulatory storms. You often find yourself on the opposite side of the table with national governments and even the EU now in terms of data protection, privacy, disinformation, fake news, data storage, and so on. As India finalizes its own data law, which I'm sure you're aware of, and presuming this data law will be a signal to other democracies, especially of the global south, what are Meta's hopes and fears?
Well, firstly, thanks so much for inviting me to join you. And I think everybody at Meta is acutely aware of the fact that we need new rules of the internet. Many of the big online companies these days are very young companies. I mean, Facebook, as I often say, was founded by Mark Zuckerberg and his colleagues and friends. I think the day after or the week after Roger Federer first became #1 in world men's tennis. So the Federer tennis era has actually gone on for longer than the existence of Facebook and now Meta as a company. And so these are young companies who have experienced explosive growth over the last decade and a half with a profound, I think, largely positive consequences for many societies and families and individuals around the world. But I think it is right, just like many other industries in the past, there is often a time lag between technological innovation and the necessary regulation that takes place. And we look forward to working collaboratively and openly and in a responsible manner with legislators and regulators in India, as we do with legislators and regulators around the world, as those new guardrails, as those new regulations or rules are put in place. And of course, India, as the world's largest democracy, it has one of the world's most vibrant digital economies. It has one of the world's largest online populations. Plays a crucial role in not only setting the rules for itself, for India, but also setting an example which will no doubt be followed by other jurisdictions around the world. And I hope what we will all bear in mind as companies evolve and as governments and parliaments pass new legislation is that whatever new rules are put in place, I hope we will all work together to safeguard the openness of a borderless internet, because that is the remarkable thing that the internet has brought to the world in recent years. And it's not just a theoretical value. I read recently of a report, an independent research report in India, that found that if there was just a decline of 1% in cross-border data flows, that could impact India's own global trade by close to 700 million US dollars. And so the value of an open internet, of the open flow of data across borders is not something which just allows individuals to share photos and videos of birthdays, of children's parties, of family holidays, of personal and family events, but it is also the lifeblood of the global modern economy. And we hope that even as regulation is introduced, we continue to safeguard those open data flows.
Thanks, Nick. Your very astute remarks lead me to two follow-up questions. The first is simply this. There is an inherent tension between governments with a very cut and dry approach to regulation, something they understand and something they'd like to understand, and a more libertarian ecosystem in California that has led to the birth and evolution of these big digital companies. Is this tension irreconcilable, or can we reach a sweet spot? How difficult will it be?
Well, I think you've identified the tension. It's a tension between technology and politics, and between innovation and political sovereignty. And I think they always somewhat bump up against each other. If you just look at the history of any technological change, from the combustion engine to telephones, from email to the radio, technology by definition, particularly technology which has widespread adoption, can lead to societal and political reactions. And I think that is a natural process as the online world matures, and as these online technologies like social media, and as we now move forward to building the new computing platforms of the future of augmented and virtual reality technologies, the so-called metaverse, I think that sort of push-you-pull-me dynamic between technologists, whether it's on the west coast of America, or in amongst the numerous world-beating unicorns born in India, or other major centers of online dynamism. I think there's always going to be a bit of a tension with the regulatory and the political process. But I think in many ways, China almost exemplifies what happens if you don't get that balance right. In other words, if politics completely triumphs over the promise of technology, because the great firewall of China has in effect cut off Chinese citizens from the online world beyond China's borders. And of course, the Chinese paradigm of the internet is one entirely driven by political priorities, not driven by the privacy or the rights of individuals. And it's led to this approach to the internet, which is closed, segmented, fragmented, and based on very heavy surveillance of people who are within that Chinese firewall. And I suspect one of the knock-on effects of the current invasion by Russia of Ukraine will be that there might be further movement towards that fragmentation of the internet. And I think that would be a great shame. And I think it would be a great disservice to India, which in many ways is one of the world's preeminent online powerhouses, and is likely to grow even further in its sort of influence and its sway in the online world in the years to come.
So let's develop the point about internet fragmentation a little more, and go back to your earlier appeal to retain a borderless internet to the degree possible. The splinternet, as some people call it, an extreme version of internet fragmentation, is, if not imminent, it's a clear and present danger or risk. Facebook and Meta's other wonderful platforms rode the wave of the one universal internet. What does the siloed new world mean for you, both for your business model, and more important, what does this mesh of domestic privacy regimes, universal values, and digital balkanization mean for us, the global publics?
So I missed it. Did you ask what did the word sovereignty mean?
No. The idea of a fragmented internet, a splinternet, as it were. What does it mean for Facebook or Meta's business model? And what does it mean for the broader idea of internet freedom for global publics who are facing the challenge of domestic privacy regimes, universal values, and digital balkanization? Three angles to a triangle that don't seem to meet.
Well, I think, as you suggest, there is definitely a tension which exists there. But I hope and I believe that one of the consequences of the burgeoning debate between the tech sector, between governments, between politicians and tech innovators is that not only do governments quite rightly want to form their own rules for how the internet is governed within their own borders, but there's a huge premium, I think, which is now placed on the ability for governments to work on a multilateral and a global level. And so if you look, for instance, at the Quad principles that India has recently subscribed to, which entrenches the importance of democratic values, recognizes the potential for technology as a force for good, that encourages collaboration on security, on trust, on safety in the online world, and seeks to work across those four major jurisdictions in terms of boosting online entrepreneurship. I think it's a very good example of precisely how international political consensus is starting to take shape as well. The EU and the US has also entered into a more structured dialogue. I personally think it would make a tremendous difference to the long-term destination of global governance of the internet if the three great democratic digital powers in the world today, namely India, the US, and the European Union, were to work more closely together and were to align on some of those principles together.
Your use of the word align is interesting because big digital platforms have been accused in the past of gaming regulatory systems and, in a sense, going jurisdiction shopping. Do you think that's been a fair criticism? And either way, whether it's been fair or unfair, do you think that is any longer sustainable, or are we moving away from it to a more enlightened regulatory system?
No, we've been very explicit for some years now that we believe that regulation is not only inevitable, that if well crafted and done in a thoughtful and proportionate way, is actually helpful to the long-term, to a long-term thriving digital ecosystem. And we, for example, we've taken significant efforts to work towards, compliance with India's IT rules. And we want to work constructively, as I said earlier, with the government on the current data protection bill. We're a law-abiding company. We must obey the law of the jurisdictions we operate in. It doesn't mean that we will in any way be shy in saying where we think regulation or legislation doesn't make sense or is not workable or is not going to keep up with technological events. We will have our own developments. We will have our own points of view. But I think if that allegation ever had any merit to it, namely the idea that tech companies were jurisdiction shopping, I think that's very much in the past. I think everybody in the tech sector acknowledges that regulation is unfolding now, and that we must work towards thoughtful and consistent compliance.
Great. Let's talk about the pandemic, which has reordered our world in many ways. It's also left the world much more digital than before the pandemic. And in this post-pandemic, more digital world, data is at the core of how many countries and societies are looking to give a boost to economic growth. The Indian digital economy is booming, as you yourself have suggested. At the end of 2021, India had 44 unicorns. By 2025, it's estimated that there could be as many as 250 unicorns. How does Meta see itself or see its contribution in this broader Indian digital economy?
Well, first, I think India has such a significant data dividend because, in large part, because of the success of the Digital India program, which has really helped to ensure that all the major building blocks of a modern, technology-driven economy have been put in place. And as you say, the kind of evidence of digital growth in India is just extraordinary. A record number of unicorn startups emerging from India. India, I think, is now on track, amazingly, to have the largest app developer base in the world by 2024. And startups are creating India-specific tech-enabled solutions at huge scale across sectors as diverse as education, commerce, financial services, agri-tech, and so on. And we believe that technology companies like Meta, we hope that we can play a critical and positive role in the growth of India's digital economy. We've invested in the digital ecosystem in India. We've invested in startups like Meesho, online shopping startup, Unacademy, an education startup. In 2021, last year, we established the Center for Fueling India's New Economy with the express goal of digitally upskilling and empowering 10 million entrepreneurs and 250,000 artists and creators. And we're already exploring the possible synergy between us, as a platform, as a digital platform, and the skilling ecosystem. And as you know, we use various digital tools which are available to us, including WhatsApp chatbots and augmented reality, to provide that immersive learning and to share entrepreneurial skills at scale. And I think one of the other things that we have done is that because of the sophistication of India as a digital market, we have often taken an India-first approach when we roll out new products globally. So the launch of Reels on Instagram, for instance, and payments on WhatsApp. These are new and new programs, such as enabling access to loans for small business. We're actively testing those innovations in India because if it works in India, it's going to work in the world just because of the sheer scale and sophistication of India's digital economy.
Nick, your enthusiasm and excitement about India is heartwarming and very almost infectious. And we do hope to see you at Raisina next year in person.
Yeah.
I'd like to end with one final question, a somewhat personal one. You've made the transition from politics to tech politics, which is more complicated. This is not a facetious question because, as you must agree, tech has emerged as a key driver of global politics today in a manner it's probably never been. So how have you managed to transition?
Well, I feel very lucky that I've made the transition. I'm 55 and in my mid-50s, and I've got oodles of energy, and I'm very grateful that I haven't just ended up on the post-politics scrap heap, which is often the fate for people who've reached the top or close to the top of the political tree in the United Kingdom. And it's I'm hugely enjoying what I'm doing. It's constantly shifting, and the sheer velocity and diversity of the issues that I deal with at Meta as a president here at Global Affairs, dealing with all of the company's policy issues and many other things besides, does remind me in many ways of the sheer velocity and sort of versatility and diversity rather of issues that you experience in government. But when you ask me, which one is more complicated, I think governing is always immensely and almost uniquely complicated. And I was Deputy Prime Minister for half a decade, for 5 years, in the wake of that terrible economic shock which the United Kingdom and many other countries of the world experienced after the 2008 financial crisis. And we really had this unenviable job of having to kind of do a cleanup operation after this economic catastrophe in the heart of our economy, which was very over-reliant on financial services at the time. And it was an exercise in having to make thousands of choices every day, knowing that not a single one of those choices was ever going to keep everybody happy. So to that extent, I think politics, and perhaps more especially the politics of government when countries are going through difficult periods of transition, is almost uniquely complex.
Almost as complex at Facebook, some would say. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, NickClegg, and have a wonderful rest of the day. And as I said, see you at Raisina here in New Delhi in person next year.
Well, I very much hope to see you in person, and thank you very much.